Kansas, this is going to be maybe fairly or unfairly perceived as the big litmus test as to just how much impact Roe v. Wade has. Now, I think, or the overturning of Roe v. Wade has had, I think it is, I would be very hesitant either way to perceive this as some type of indicator, because people are going out. It's one thing to go out and vote against, vote for a Democrat because Roe v. Wade has been overturned. It is another to go out and vote to make sure that abortion rights are protected. And that can cut both ways. You may see more Republicans come out as a way of voting to essentially get abortion banned in Kansas. Now, to be clear, the Kansas Constitution has been interpreted by the Kansas State Supreme Court as protecting a woman's right to choose. So the amendment is to essentially eliminate that protection. So you want to vote no if you're in Kansas on that amendment. There's been some shenanigans, my understanding, where people are, sending out robocalls implying that voting yes protects a woman's right to choose. That is not the case. You need to vote no. I don't know how much of a bellwether you can measure this as. Even if they come out and vote to maintain the protection for abortion, that's a direct one-to-one relationship with that outcome, as opposed to the bank shot of voting for Democrats, versus a Republican. Mm-hmm. At the same time, Republicans are going to be a lot more motivated to come out and strip women and folks who can get pregnant their right to decide to not be pregnant. And so Republicans may be a little bit more motivated in that election. We're going to have to wait and see.
I saw the New York Times was speaking to people on the ground in Kansas about it, and they interviewed a Republican, or not a Republican, sorry, a self-identified independent who voted for Mitt Romney before. And he was saying, I'm very motivated. I want to protect a woman's right to choose, and I won't vote for any other candidate that supports a ban on abortion. I don't think many voters like that exist. I think that's kind of like a darling for a reporter to talk to, but there might be some.
Well, here is what I think is a lot more telling, and we'll get John from San Antonio to call in the fun half. But I mentioned this yesterday. There was a USA Today Suffolk University poll. And it's really interesting. They took a poll in June and asked the same question, like, how likely are you to vote in November? And I think the very likely was 29%. This is in June, right after I think it was right after the leak, but before the announcement. So it was after the leak. 29% of Democrats said very likely to vote. They did it again at the end of July, and that number was 64%. That's nuts. And I mean, it's interesting because I'm looking at the story.
It's the second paragraph.
Yeah, I'm looking at the story here from June 22nd when they did the original poll. And the title of was Furor Over Roe v. Wade Reversal Likely Won't Rescue Democrats in Midterm Elections. That's what this poll said in June. And I mean, that has changed dramatically. A third of the Democrats say that the court decision. Now, let's be clear here too. This is at this moment right now, of those 13 states that had trigger bans, 7 have banned abortion completely. Another 4 have implemented a ban starting at 6 weeks of pregnancy. And so we can anticipate 2 more of those, probably whatever court cases are holding it up, to press the ban. And then it's conceivable over the next couple of months, ultimately people are anticipating 26 states, over the next couple of months, we could see 4 or 5 more. Kansas could be one of them. We could see maybe 6 or 7 more. And every time a state implements a ban, it's in the news more and people become more aware of it. I mean, when you look at this poll, I don't know if you can say that this accurately represents how many Democrats are most likely to vote. But what it does represent is that the more attention it gets in the media, the more Democrats are more likely to vote. That is like, you can read the trajectory and the trend. A third of Democrats say at this point, and remember, well, there's another point to this. A third of Democrats say the court decision hasn't had any effect on their likelihood in voting. 75% of Republicans say it has no effect. Now, this is interesting, too, for people who argue that if you give people what they want, they will be more inclined to vote. Now, Republicans and Democrats don't have the same voting patterns, so this isn't a one-to-one comparison. But the Republicans have gotten what they've wanted, certainly throughout my entire life, practically. And this has been, in many respects, the holy grail. And it will not make, 75% of them say it has no effect on them to vote. Now, they could all be ready to vote and this and that, so you can't extrapolate too much from this. But 21% said it made them more likely to vote. And so if it's going to make anybody more likely to vote, you would assume that it would have been higher numbers. In June, Democrats by 53 to 36% said the economy was more important to their vote than abortion. Now, in response to an open-ended question, 27% of Democrats cite abortion as their top election concern, more than any other issue and more than a combination of the 12% who name the economy and 7% who name inflation. So whatever was going on 2 or 3 months ago, I mean, that's a year, it's like literally a month and a half ago, has changed dramatically. And the only thing that we're seeing going forward right now is inflation is, if you look at gas prices anyways, they're going down a little bit. We could be headed into a recession, but I don't know that it was people are going to feel the impact of that, at least, these voters, for another couple of months. So it's going to be interesting. In June, Americans split 40-40 as to whether they supported Democratic or Republican candidate for Congress. Now Democrats are favored by 4%. It's not a huge thing, but that's the trend. And we're seeing that in other places. Women are more likely than men to say the decision could send them to the polls. 49% compared with 32%. That obviously helps Democrats. So did 44% of younger people, 18 to 34 years old, the age group most likely to report an impact, which is also key for Democrats. 64 to 23% self-identified liberals are more likely than conservatives to say that it would affect their decision to vote. And broadly speaking, across the board, asked to name the most important issue affecting their vote for Congress in November, 20% volunteered the economy. It's a combination of Republicans and Democrats. 16% abortion, 11% inflation. 83% of registered voters, including 91% of Democrats, 73% of Republicans support exceptions to abortion bans when the pregnancy is result of a rape or incest. Another 87% of voters, Republicans and Democrats, 92 to 80% support exceptions when the ban, exceptions to abortion bans when someone's life or health is threatened by their pregnancy. Now those two numbers are also important because over the next 3 or 4 months, there is at least the possibility that we're going to hear more and more stories of women dying because of ectopic pregnancies, of people who can get pregnant dying of ectopic pregnancies, every day you can find a story that it reports out. Lawyers in this state hospital have told their doctors not to treat their patients until they basically go into sepsis. We're gonna have more and more stories of people dying because they can't get the health services they need. And so those numbers of these people who are in favor of bans, exceptions to bans, they're going to slide into, I'm voting to get rid of the abortion ban, period. There's only one direction for those people to go. The question is, how effective will Democrats be? How much reporting will we see, which will tell us, what kind of movement we're seeing there? Because we have gone over this many, many times. The exceptions are useless. They are window dressing. They are a fig leaf. In practice, these things mean nothing. And it's going to get even worse as these Republican state governments begin to gear up to prosecute people. So it's going to be interesting to see how this impacts.
Mark Joseph Stern has a good piece in Slate. When can dying patients get a life-saving abortion? These hospital panels will now decide. Remember death panels?
Yep.
Mark Joseph Stern has there's a paragraph. These committees reveal little about their work to the public, and their membership is usually kept secret. As a rule, they do not talk to the press. They have long function in the background, a mostly obscure feature of the hospital administration. Now that's all changed in our post-Roe nation. The ethics committee, just reading that sort of thing makes you chill. The ethics committee may decide whether pregnant patients live or die.
And I'd be curious as to what's the turnaround time on their decision-making process?
I would imagine
beep them out of bed.
They're
2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, unless it's sort of like, well, we need to see this level of infection, this level of complete agony and pain, this level of bleeding, this level of sepsis. I don't know how you measure those things so, specifically that you can actually set down rules. And then, of course, they're negotiating with their lawyers, right? And they're going to err on the side of protecting themselves legally. That's where it's going to start. Because
naturally, you can't put doctors in a position to lose their license over a situation that's essentially out of their control.
It's going to be nuts. It's going to be absolutely nuts. And so we'll see how this impacts. And Kansas is going to be the first data point. Again, it is not going to be conclusive one way or another, regardless of what the outcome is in Kansas. But it sure is going to be interesting to see how folks vote.
And you say how the news sort of amps it up. Unfortunately, we can depend on news, horrifying news out of these sorts of decisions that is going to keep it current. Maybe,
but it involves a certain amount of local reporting. Right. And really, the one thing that, how many times, I'm just thinking in the context of what comes to us now, how many times can we tell the same story on this program, for instance, that here's another story out of Texas. Now, they're all coming out of Texas right now, not all of them, but the vast majority, because Texas is about 3 or 4 months ahead of the rest of the country with their ban, essentially, on abortion, because their 6-week abortion, after 6-week abortion ban went into effect in December. And everybody else is basically kicked in a month ago. But come September and October, we're going to start hearing from those other states. It's going to be horrible. It really is. But we shall see. what impact it has. And so that's the value, at least, or at least I should say, the analytical value of what's happening in Kansas.